On today's Brew Talk, we talk about lease.
Less is more. Oh, sounded good. Yeah, we're going to talk about lease today. The good, the bad, the ugly, what to do with it, why you should have it, and when you should have it.
And what the heck is it?
First, let me start by explaining what lease actually is. Lease is actually the particulate matter that falls out of solution when you make a brew. It can contain dead, dying, and dormant yeast cells, as well as living yeast cells, and proteins, various other coagulates, things that are in suspension in your brew, as well as actual, biodegradable stuff, bits of stems and seeds and skins and things like that. You will even see it in a pure juice fermentation. A lot of people have been freaked out because there's a half inch of this stuff at the bottom. I dumped it. Oh my God, don't dump it. That's what you want. If you don't see lease, be more worried than if you do. Anyway, we also have some questions and comments here. I have 2 pages today.
So, part of the visual of lease or a properly active fermentation is you will see sediment on the bottom, and that's what we're referring to as lease. But you'll also see kind of a foamy, filmy-like thing going on top. And that is what is referred to as a Croissant line.
Yep.
So both of those things that, if you're new to homebrewing, might freak you out a little bit, are perfectly normal and part of the fermentation process.
Now, if you don't get a croissant at the top, don't worry. It's okay. But if you do, don't freak out, because a lot of people have freaked out like, oh, it's mold. It's not mold. It's foam. It's just where active yeast sat on top rather than getting fully into the brew, and it foamed up and stuck to the sides, and when it dries, it's called a croissant line.
Right.
Real simple.
And there's proteins in that foam, so when it does dry at the top, it'll leave a crunchy residue, and that's completely normal. Don't freak out.
Let me get to some questions here and some comments. Raven, I have one. What an interesting name. When you have that settled out, do you have any plans to make the lease into bread? I've seen a few recipes online. I've been thinking of trying it rather than toss it out. That's a really good idea. And on the Cooks channel, that's the City Steading Cooks channel, there's links below, we're going to do that. I just have to find the right lease. Because, we just did one with an elderberry grape. I'm thinking that might not be the best one to make a bread from. Unless I wanted to make a fruit bread, which is a different thing.
But a mead lease...
Yeah, or a beer lease might even be good.
Sure.
So when we have one of those handy, we are actually going to do that. Because, right now people are looking for alternative ways to get yeast. And I'm totally with you. By the way, watch our video on Friday on CS Brews. We talk about this again. Not exactly the same. We make a brew. Anyway. Kinesia. My husband John is a friggin' weirdo. When we rack our brews, he will drink the lease.
This makes Brian go, ooh. This makes me go, yeah.
Here's the thing. I have actually met John in person. I don't put it past him. I believe he would. Not that that's a bad thing. I can't do it. The whole having particulates in the bottom of my glass bothers me. Like if you make coffee and there's a couple of bits of grinds in there, I gag. I can't do it. So when people talk about their stuff not being clear and all that, I'm like, really? If it doesn't bother me, it's not going to bother you. Okay, let's just get that straight. As far as drinking the lease, I don't recommend it. It's not toxic or anything, but it could give you pretty bad indigestion because sometimes it could be living yeast, which is never a good idea to introduce into your body. That's about the worst I can say. Other than that, there's no harm from it, but...
As far as that statement of it's never a good idea to put inside your body, it depends on what strand of yeast it is. So we'll leave it at that.
Well, yeah. We're not going there. No. Anyway, Nunya, just pour a couple bottles of apple juice on top of that lease and add some honey and let the remaining yeast go to town. You know what? We're doing that. On Friday, we are actually doing that exact thing. Well, not with apple juice.
And not with honey.
But other than that, we're doing the exact same thing. Basically, we're going to reuse some lease and make a brew from it. And that's what they're talking about. I've never been a big proponent of it. We tried washing yeast once, and it had varying results. I've never actually just reused lease before. And I always said, well, the reason why I don't is because most of our brews go on camera, and for consistency's sake, I want to know that it's going to work. Well, you know what? I am okay with messing it up and failing once in a while, so you're going to see that on Friday. Chad Winhold. This is on our racking too soon video. He said, just to confirm what I got from this. So leaving the mead in primary fermentation until the yeast is done is okay no matter how long it takes? Yes, absolutely. You do not want to take it off of the lees. The lees is your colony as well as what's in the brew. When it's done, it's done. Until it's done, you do not want to remove the things that would make it actually be able to get done.
Now, if you have solids like fruits and other things, you may want to do a ref rack, and you've seen us do that in our videos that include those things, because sometimes the larger solids could cause an issue. But the actual yeast cake, the actual lees that falls to the bottom, that is part of your colony.
Now, if you can
and
keep
is
your
what's
fruit,
helping fermentation go.
If you can keep your fruit submerged, there's absolutely no reason to have to remove it. None. Anyway, he had more. So, not racking beyond a month's time is okay. Yes, you can wait months. It does not matter. As long as it's still going. Even if it's done, it can sit. It doesn't matter. Still more. Leaving it on the lees for that long is okay. It will not affect the taste. Okay. Let me explain. There's a myth going around, and this might be true for beer. Beer is a much lower alcohol content and a little bit different thing. When it comes to wines and your higher ABV, ciders, meads, things like that, cider can be more like beer. Sorry, I know I went back and forth there, but if you made like a higher ABV cider, you can leave it on the lees for months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, before there is a noticeable taste change. Now, noticeable. Does that mean it instantly goes one day from it's fine to the next day, ew, this has lees in it? No, it's a gradual thing. Now, beer might be a shorter time. Don't quote me on the number of months, because every brew is going to be different. Every single situation is going to be different. But I've left them for 6 months and 8 months in secondary before on lees. I've left them in primary for 6 and 8 months. Never, ever have we had a problem. So it's sort of a myth.
If you're doing a wild fermentation, the extended period of time is necessary, and you certainly don't want to remove any lees or any of the...
You'd kill it right there. You'd stop your fermentation. Wild fermentation is a whole different animal. They don't build up a colony as fast. They build up a colony as they ferment. So it takes a lot longer for them to finish a brew. Okay. Bill Baker, it's best to use the lees from the last ferment to start a new one. See, I'm hearing this a lot, so we said, let's give it a try. Sean Carnell, there's a pizza parlor / brewery in San Diego which uses their house ale yeast for their pizza crust. Have you experimented with ale yeast in bread products? See, that's a two-part question. He used the lees, he uses their house ale yeast for their pizza crust. Okay, so they use their yeast for that. Now, here's the thing. Back in the day, that's what you did. That's how you made bread. You got barm from your local beer maker, which was basically just a foam, the kreuzen actually, off the top of the beer, and you put that into your bread, and that was your yeast supply for your bread. So absolutely this would work. I've never done it because here's the thing. Bread yeast is a lot cheaper than ale yeast, so it doesn't make sense to me to use a more expensive yeast when it actually doesn't do the job quite as good as a commercial bread yeast does.
But if you are a boutique style brewery slash pizza house, particularly in California,
it could blend your flavors nicely.
An awesome marketing.
Also, I'm starting to get into the idea of wild yeasts, reusing yeast, things like that. We are working on a video behind the scenes, it hasn't been filmed yet, of yeast starters. And I have one going, it's working, it's slow, but it's working. And I want to learn a little bit more before we make a video on it so we can really show you guys what to do and how to make that work.
There's also a concept about environmental yeast, and that is your own particular environment's
whole different thing.
Natural yeast in that particular environment. So in the case of this brewery slash pizza place, they probably have a very unique strain of environmental yeast, and using it in both of the products that yeast would be used in is actually a pretty cool idea.
That actually brings up an interesting question. We get this a lot. People think, oh, if you just leave a brew open to the air, the yeast get in it and they form. That's not entirely accurate. Most things have yeast in them. Almost every living organic thing in the outside world has yeast on it already. You saw in our hibiscus mead, we actually put in whole branches from our lime tree. We removed them too, but we put them in because the yeast is living on them. It was probably in the honey as well, but I wasn't 100% sure, so I didn't want to take that chance. But to open it and leave it out, the likelihood of you getting enough yeast to build a colony and actually ferment it is pretty slim. What people actually do is they use a wider dish, like a large petri dish, and they collect it that way and cultivate a colony from those few yeasts that they collected. Very different thing. If you just put a brew out there, it's probably going to spoil, which spoiling and fermenting, debatable if they're the same thing. It's probably going to go bad with bacteria before yeast can actually build up a colony. Because here's what starts to happen. The yeast will actually move in and they make the situation more appealing to them. They change the pH of that brew, making it where other bacteria and other yeasts can't survive. So they effectively kill off other things. But if they don't build that colony fast enough, now the other bacteria can take over and they make it more appealing for them, which in some cases, sours and things like that, some people really like those. I'm not a huge fan. That's why we haven't done any. If I find one that I really like, I might give it a shot. But they will take over and weed out the yeast. So it's all about, survival of the fittest, basically. So that's why we like to use a substrate or an ingredient that has yeast on it already so that it'll build up. But if you do decide to go that route, please don't use kaffir lime leaves. We have found out that they are extraordinarily strong. So we're going to start using our mulberry leaves and twigs and our grape leaves and twigs. But that's another show. George Lance. I wonder if we're related. My mother's maiden name was Lanton, which was shortened from Lance at some point, wasn't it? Didn't you find that out? Or was that another
There
myth?
were so many.
That might have been another myth from my family.
Who knows?
It's okay. Even if we're not related, you're good with me. Could you use the liquid close to the yeast to start another batch? Now, on the surface, you might go, oh yeah, of course you can. But he's saying use the liquid. The liquid is not really where the yeast is. That liquid is wine or mead or whatever your brew was. You want the stuff underneath it. Now, in ours on Friday, I just pointed to it because we already did that video. We actually used some of that and just stirred it all up. We used it as a mixing agent. So there was a little bit left and we used that. So if that answers your question, I hope that answers your question. You don't want to use just the liquid. You want the actual yeast itself. Okay. Dark Side of Man 7, which begs the question, who is Dark Side of Man 6? 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Anyway, just found your channel, and I know this is old, but I do have a question. I don't know what video this was on. Is there any way to stop the sediment from building up on the bottom? Multiple racks, additives, etc. If not, is there a way to harden it? Calcium tablets, so it doesn't come out unless vigorously washed. Again, I know this vid is old, and you may not even see this, but if you can address this, I'd much appreciate it. Thanks in advance.
Some yeasts are naturally going to compact on their own.
They flocculate
and
more.
Make a really good yeast cake, but that's a variable on the yeast type. It's a variable on the brew type. As far as adding additives to make it compact like that,
I'm not doing that.
We aren't going to do that, and we don't recommend doing that.
There was more to his question because I responded to him.
Okay.
And he was talking about like when he carbonates, there's sediment in the bottom. There's always going to be. That's part of it.
Yeah.
Natural carbonation is actually a tiny fermentation. So you're going to get yeast falling out of solution. It happens. There's no way to combat that. Now, people have done this weird thing where they get them really cold and then they pop them open and they pour very carefully into another bottle. I mean, sure, if you really want to do that, go for it. You can do it and get rid of the yeast. Me, I just don't drink the last, half inch.
Or me and John just drink it all.
Yeah, that's just weird. But as far as like adding calcium tablets, I don't know if calcium tablets would even do anything. Doesn't make much sense to me. I'm not sure where that came from. And I'm not dissing his comment. I don't actually know what that would do. But as far as what he's talking about is, it's either in the carbonation process or he doesn't want like that wavy stuff. Bread yeast is known to do that. Okay, if you use a good wine yeast like D47 or 71B or any of the other ones that we use all the time, they leave a pretty decent yeast cake at the bottom that doesn't really get into stuff. So use a decent yeast, that problem should be abated, but you're always going to have some. Paul Horrocks, hey guys, I love your videos. Thank you.
Thanks.
But I was wondering, you talk of racking and double racking your wines to get rid of the sediment and lees. Is there a reason you can't use, say, a coffee filter or some such thing to catch the sediments on a single racking? Would it add aeration, affect the wine?
We did a video just on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Please don't use a coffee filter. It's just not a good idea. Now, somebody said today, how many times have you made vinegar using a coffee filter? Okay, twice. It's true. I've done it. It has happened. We activated the acetobacters and made vinegar. Now, was it because of using a coffee filter? I can't say, but why take a risk? I would much rather use a siphon and just siphon down to, that last little bit rather than try to even use that last little bit through a coffee filter or anything like that. Here's the thing. Yeast are microscopic, so coffee filter is not. They're going to go through it anyway. You're going to stop the particulate matter and things like that, but you won't stop the actual yeast, so you're not really doing yourself any good there. You might even reactivate some of that yeast in your brew and make a bottle bomb. To me, it's just a risk versus reward thing. It's just not worth it.
Now, if you follow our process that we're going to do on Friday, then that's not even an issue because that little bit of waste is going to be reused and no longer be waste.
Sorry we keep pushing this Friday's video, but we're kind of excited about it. Because in this time when people really can't get out and get new stuff and they might be... This is a phenomenal idea, and it was one of those like, duh, why didn't I think of this before? It just really hit me that way that we should have been doing this all along. This is a great idea, and I really hope it works. I'm starting to get more into the wild fermentations and cultivating your own yeasts and things like that, so I think it's kind of a really good idea. But I wanted to say something else. I get a lot of questions about filtering your wines and yeast, using coffee filters and all these other things. People have said, put a rag on the end, and can you do this, can you do that? Here's the thing. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just use a siphon. That's what we've been doing for generations because it works, it's simple, it's effective, and it's cheap. You do not waste much.
It is also quick.
Yes, it's
Part
efficient.
of the reason with using a micro mesh filtration system is that it takes an inordinate amount of time for the liquid to pass through that, particularly if the solids that you're trying to catch work and catch. It's going to create a thicker layer, making it even more difficult for the liquid to pass through.
Now, there are wine filtration systems out there that, you can buy, and they probably do a great job. Honestly, I don't care. I'm not buying one. I'm not going to use one. I don't see the need. To us, we'd like to keep things nice and simple. I don't want to have to go buy another gadget that takes up space that does one thing. I know I sound like Alton Brown, right? But why do I want that when I already can do it using a siphon that cost me $10? There's just, to me, not much point. Now, some people swear by them, and you know what? More power to them. I'm not going to say you're wrong, because you're not. How you want to do it is how you want to do it. How I want to do it is how I want to do it. I like to promote the idea that anyone can do this. Anyone. For a minimal investment. I mean, honestly, buy a jar, a gallon jar, an airlock and a stopper and an auto siphon. $30 maybe? Buy some juice, use bread yeast. You're started already. You're already in it. Now add the hydrometer and the tube. Maybe $50 is your initial investment. But with that initial investment, you can make hundreds of brews. Hundreds. There's no parts to wear out or anything like that. Sure, when you buy a hydrometer, I like to say, don't just buy one, buy three, because you're going to drop one. It's just going to happen.
They're very delicate.
Yeah, they don't call them hydrometers for nothing. But it's a minimal investment to get into this hobby that can actually help enrich your life. A lot of the brews that we make are actually not even unhealthy. They're good for you.
The only caveat to anybody should be able to do this is as long as it's legal in your area and you are of the proper age.
Actually, I'm going to say this. The drinking age in the U.S. is 21. There is actually no minimum age for making it. I am not promoting youngsters making this stuff. I still think you shouldn't make it unless you're 21 too. But that's the way the law is written. We know people that have their kids help them, and there's been some question as to the legality. That is actually legal as long as you don't let them taste it.
If you're showing them a scientific process and having them integrate in that so that they're getting an education from the process, then I say go for it. I had friends whose father taught them how beer works.
There's nothing wrong with that. As long as they don't drink any of the product.
Yeah.
then it's completely legal for you to do, as long as it's legal for you to make wine, cider, or mead in your home. Another thing about legality, we get a lot of people asking us about distilling again. Okay, I'm just going to be totally honest here. We're not going to talk about distilling. Comments that talk about distilling get removed from our channel. I know somebody's going to be angry at me that I remove comments, but it's not what we're about. It is illegal for us to do. Therefore, I don't condone it. I don't promote it. I don't teach it. We don't do it. Why would I? It's illegal. I'm not going to do that on a YouTube channel that thousands of people watch and the police can be looking at. Why would I do that? A lot of people also don't seem to understand distilling versus brewing. They're different things. Brewing is using yeast to create a natural product using biological processes. Once that is done, distilling is mechanically removing the water, leaving only the alcohol behind, thereby making a higher ABV product. They're different steps in a process. Okay, brewing, once you're done, you have a beer or a wine, cider, or mead. You can take any of those and make a distilled product. That is the line that we just don't cross. We don't do that. If they ever do make it legal in Florida and in the United States, you better believe we're going to be doing it, because why not?
Or for some reason we win the lottery and move to New Zealand, then there you go.
Yeah, if we ever happen to live in a place where it's legal, well, then we will do that. And then I will leave you with this last question. Google user, could you use the lease again for a second batch? Find out Friday. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.